When God prepares to release something new in your life, He often begins by disturbing the old way of thinking that you've gotten comfortable with. Because an old mindset cannot contain a new season, it will always reject what it does not understand. That's why so many people pray for new opportunities but keep thinking in the patterns of the old. The shift must begin in your thoughts before you ever hold the promise in your hands. An old mindset will always look for familiar patterns to validate progress. It will try to fit the new blessing into an old box. But the reality is this: a promise from God will not fit into the limitations of yesterday. If you try to approach the new with the same mental framework you used in the wilderness, you will sabotage the promise before you even step into it. The danger of holding on to an old mindset is that it makes you blind to God's timing. You could be standing in the very place you prayed for and still miss it because your mind wasn't prepared to recognize it. A new mindset gives you the eyes to see what your old mindset would have overlooked. Your prayers can be right, your faith can be real, but if your mindset is wrong, the blessing will slip through your fingers. The mindset is the container, and the promise is the oil. If the container cannot hold it, the oil spills and is wasted. That is why God presses us to let go of old frameworks, old ways of reasoning, and old habits of thought. God is not just trying to change your life, He is trying to change your lens. He knows that without the right perspective, you will misuse or mishandle what He has prepared for you. That is why He told Israel they had to be renewed before entering the promised land. He couldn't allow a wilderness mindset to enter a land of abundance. Every blessing requires a mentality that can carry it. The question isn't whether God is able to do it. The question is whether your mind is able to sustain it. If you are still thinking lack, you cannot hold abundance. If you are still thinking brokenness, you cannot hold healing. If you are still thinking small, you cannot hold greatness. So when God speaks about shifting your mindset, it isn't just motivational, it is preparation for survival in your next season. Without a shift in thinking, you will walk into a promise that your hands cannot keep because your mind never accepted it as possible. Every move of God begins as a seed in the mind. Before Abraham walked, he believed. Before Moses stretched his rod, he envisioned deliverance. Before David faced Goliath, he saw himself victorious in his spirit. Faith always takes root in the mind before it bears fruit in reality. The danger is that many people are waiting for external confirmation while never cultivating internal conviction. They think their lives will change when their circumstances change, but the truth is their circumstances will only change when their minds change. If your thoughts never shift, your feet will never move. Faith is not just about believing in God, it's about training your mind to agree with God. When your thoughts agree with His Word, your life begins to align with His promises. But when your thoughts resist, doubt becomes the stronghold that locks you out of the very thing you prayed for. If you look at the people who stepped into divine promise, they had one thing in common. Their faith was rooted in a renewed mind. They were able to see what others could not. They were able to imagine what others refused to believe. Their victory was birthed in the unseen realm of thought long before it appeared in the physical. Faith is imagination baptized by the Spirit of God. It is the ability to see things that don't yet exist as though they already do. When your mind holds faith, your actions follow faith. When your actions follow faith, the results manifest faith. The entire process begins with how you think. The reason the enemy attacks your thoughts is because he knows if he can pollute your thinking, he can paralyze your progress. If he can fill your mind with fear, you won't even attempt to walk into your destiny. But if you guard your thoughts and feed them with faith, you can walk into places others deemed impossible. Faith is not about ignoring reality. It's about believing God in spite of reality. When your mindset is anchored in faith, you begin to walk boldly speak boldly, and live boldly. Your life becomes an echo of what your mind already embraced. One of the greatest enemies to a renewed mindset is the memory of your past. You cannot walk into what God is calling you to if you are still chained to what He already delivered you from. The enemy loves to use your past mistakes, past pain, and past failures to keep your mind locked in a cycle of defeat. Every time you try to step into a new season, your past whispers, "Remember what happened last time?" And if you're not careful, you will let your history dictate your destiny. Your mindset has to be so transformed that your past is no longer the filter through which you interpret your future. You have to decide that yesterday's version of you does not control today's opportunities. God already forgave what was, and He is preparing what shall be. But until your mind lets go of the shame and the guilt, you will keep disqualifying yourself from promises that God already qualified you for. The truth is, your past may have shaped you, but it does not define you. It may have taught you lessons, but it does not decide your identity. When your mindset shifts from guilt to grace, you stop running from your past and start walking into your future. Some people are trapped in cycles not because God hasn't opened doors, but because their mindset won't let them walk through them. They are still rehearsing what they lost instead of focusing on what God is releasing. A renewed mindset stops dwelling on closed chapters and starts expecting new pages. The enemy thrives on memory warfare. He wants you to relive your pain so you never embrace your promise. But when your mindset is renewed, you see your past as a stepping stone, not a stumbling block. You see your failures as testimonies, not tombstones. Your mind cannot be anchored in yesterday if you expect to inherit tomorrow. God isn't asking you to erase your past. He's asking you to stop living in it. The shift happens when your mindset no longer consults your history for permission to walk into destiny. When God delivered Israel out of Egypt, He set them free from slavery in one night, but it took 40 years to get the slavery out of their minds. That's because the wilderness wasn't just about testing their bodies, it was about reshaping their thinking. A people who only knew chains could not suddenly manage freedom without their minds being transformed. Every time the pressure came, they murmured and complained. Instead of seeing the promise ahead, they longed to go back to bondage. That's what a negative mindset does. It convinces you that where you were is safer than where God is taking you. It tricks you into believing that the familiar pain is better than the unfamiliar promise. The wilderness is not meant to destroy you, it's meant to develop you. But if your thoughts remain negative, the wilderness becomes a prison instead of a process. Many people never leave that season because their minds refuse to embrace the vision of something greater. Joshua and Caleb saw the same land as the 10 spies, but they didn't see the same reality. The 10 saw giants, Joshua and Caleb saw opportunity. The difference was not in the land, but in the mindset. 2 saw possibility, while 10 saw defeat. That mindset difference determined who entered the promise and who perished in the wilderness. Your thoughts will either be your wilderness or your passport. They will either keep you wandering in circles or propel you into destiny. A negative mindset makes you camp in a place God only meant for you to pass through. And if you stay there too long, what was temporary becomes permanent. The wilderness wasn't designed to last forever, but your mindset determines whether you treat it as a hallway or a home. When your thoughts are stuck on lack, you will die in a place of just enough, never stepping into more than enough. If you're still carrying wilderness thinking, you can't manage promise. Edland living, the abundance waiting for you requires a renewed mind. Until you see the giants as bread for your faith, you'll keep circling mountains God already told you to cross. Complaining blinds you to what God has already done, while gratitude opens your eyes to see His faithfulness. The children of Israel had manna falling from heaven, yet they still murmured. They had water from a rock, yet they still grumbled. Their mouths revealed a mindset unprepared for abundance. Gratitude shifts your focus from what's missing to what's present. It trains your mind to recognize the hand of God in every season. When you start thanking God for daily provision, your heart begins to expand with expectation for greater blessings. A grateful mindset is fertile ground for increase. A complaining spirit keeps you small. It magnifies your problems and minimizes God's power. But gratitude does the opposite. It magnifies God and minimizes your problems. When you develop a grateful mindset, you change the atmosphere of your entire life. Gratitude is not denial of difficulty. It is recognition of God's consistency. It says, yes, I may not have everything I want, but I see God's hand in what I do have. That mindset protects you from bitterness and prepares you for more. Even Jesus modeled gratitude before increase. When He fed the 5,000, He first gave thanks for the loaves and fishes. Gratitude became the bridge from scarcity to multiplication. Your mindset works the same way. Thankfulness prepares the way for more. A grateful mind cannot stay small. When your perspective is anchored in thanksgiving, your capacity grows. You begin to expect bigger, pray bigger, and believe bigger because your thoughts are trained to recognize that if God did it before, He can do it again. The truth is, you don't need more to be grateful. You need gratitude to receive more. A thankful mindset positions you to see the promise, seize the promise, and steward the promise without losing it. The words you speak are not empty. They are seeds that take root in your mind. Every time you speak defeat, you reinforce a defeated mindset. Every time you speak faith, you reinforce a victorious mindset. Your words are shaping your thought patterns, even when you don't realize it. What you repeatedly declare eventually becomes what you believe. If you keep saying, I can't, your mind will stop searching for solutions. But if you start saying, I can, your mind will rise to the challenge. Your tongue is writing the script your mind will follow. The power of life and death is in the tongue, but the first place your words bring life or death is in your own mind. If you want to think differently, you must speak differently. Your vocabulary determines your mentality, and your mentality determines your destiny. That is why God had to change Abram's name to Abraham and Sarai's name to Sarah. He wanted their words to align with their promise. Every time they said their names, their minds were being renewed to believe what God had spoken. Your words are like a thermostat. They set the climate of your thoughts. Speak small, think small, live small. Speak faith, think faith, live faith. A promise requires a mindset built by consistent words of life. When you start speaking truth even before you see it, your mind begins to adapt. It begins to align with the expectation of God's promise. Your speech is a rehearsal for your manifestation. So you must guard your words carefully because they are either building the mindset for your promise or tearing it down. Every declaration matters because every declaration is a seed in the soil of your mind. The promise of God is never ordinary. It always stretches you beyond where you are. That's why you can't approach it with average thinking. If your mindset remains small, you will always downgrade the vision to fit your thoughts instead of upgrading your thoughts to fit the vision. Higher level blessings require higher level thinking. You cannot manage the responsibility of the promise with the same mindset you had in survival mode. What got you through the storm will not be enough to manage the palace. Every new dimension demands a new mentality. When God told Abraham he would be the father of nations, Abraham couldn't comprehend it at first. His mindset was still limited by age and circumstances. But God lifted his eyes to the stars so his thinking could rise to match the magnitude of the promise. If your thoughts don't rise, your promise will overwhelm you. A higher level mindset gives you the capacity to hold what God is releasing. Without it, you will fumble blessings and mismanage opportunities because your thoughts never rose to the occasion. That's why God stretches your vision before He releases the promise. He gives you glimpses of destiny to elevate your thinking. He forces you to imagine greater so that when the blessing arrives, your mind is already large enough to carry it. The reason some promises feel delayed is not because God isn't ready, but because your mind isn't ready. He has to elevate your thinking so your life can sustain the weight of His Word. So if you want to step into something higher, you must be willing to train your mind to think higher. Low-level thoughts cannot sustain high-level blessings. Fear is the silent killer of destiny. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers just enough to paralyze your progress. When God calls you into something new, fear will always be the first to confront you. It will remind you of your inadequacies, magnify the obstacles, and try to convince you that the promise is too big for you. Fear thrives in the mind. It paints false pictures of defeat before you even attempt victory. It convinces you to quit before you start. But when your mindset shifts, you begin to recognize fear for what it is, a liar. A renewed mind knows that fear is not evidence of defeat, but evidence of opportunity. The children of Israel saw giants and trembled, but Joshua and Caleb saw the same giants and declared, "We are well able." The difference was not the enemy, it was the mindset. Fear caused the majority to shrink back, but faith caused the few to step forward. Fear will always magnify the size of the problem while minimizing the size of your God. It distorts perspective until you forget who is on your side. That's what. You cannot allow fear to live rent-free in your thoughts. If fear builds a home in your mind, it will evict your faith. You cannot wait for fear to disappear before you move. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to move in spite of fear. A renewed mindset refuses to bow to intimidation. It refuses to let fear dictate the outcome. Every time you confront fear, your faith grows stronger. Every time you silence fear with belief, your promise comes closer. Fear will always try to block the door, but faith is the key that unlocks it. So, if you are going to walk into your promise, your mind has to shift from fear to faith. You must decide that fear will not sit in the driver's seat of your destiny. Shifting your mindset is not a one-time event. It is a daily choice. Every morning you wake up, you are confronted with thoughts from yesterday, doubts from last week, and fears from last year. If you don't intentionally renew your mind, the old will creep back in and sabotage the new. Renewal requires discipline. You cannot casually think your way into destiny. You must feed your mind with truth, guard it from lies, and constantly remind it of God's promises. Without consistent renewal, your mindset will default to negativity. The Apostle Paul wrote about being transformed by the renewing of the mind. He didn't say renewed once, he said renewing. That means the process is continuous. It's like taking a shower. Yesterday's cleansing won't carry you through today. Renewal is needed daily. A renewed mind doesn't just happen. It's built through practice. It's built by choosing what you focus on, what you meditate on, and what you allow into your spirit. Your inputs determine your outlook. If you feed your mind doubt, don't expect it to produce faith. The reason so many people struggle to walk in promise is because they treat renewal like an event instead of a lifestyle. They want breakthrough without maintenance, victory without vigilance. But a renewed mind is something you must guard every single day. Renewal doesn't mean you'll never struggle with negative thoughts. It means you'll never let them dominate. You replace lies with truth, fear with faith, despair with hope. Over time, your mindset becomes conditioned to align with God's Word. If you want to keep walking in promise, you must keep renewing your mind. The moment you stop, old patterns will creep back in and drag you toward defeat. Renewal is your safeguard against regression. Your mindset is not only shaped by what you think, but also by who you walk with. The voices around you feed your perspective, either stretching it or shrinking it. If you surround yourself with small thinkers, you will eventually shrink to fit their expectations. The wrong crowd can sabotage the right promise. When the spies returned from the promised land, the majority spread negativity, and their influence infected the whole camp. That's the danger of surrounding yourself with people who cannot see at your level. They will contaminate your faith. If you want to maintain a promise mindset, you need people who challenge you to think higher, dream bigger, and believe stronger. Iron sharpens iron, and your circle should sharpen your vision. If everyone around you is comfortable in the wilderness, you will never have the courage to step into Canaan. Sometimes, the hardest part of shifting your mindset is shifting your circle. You cannot carry everyone with you into your next level. Some relationships are only equipped for where you've been, not where you're going. A promise mindset requires you to discern who belongs in your future and who is tied to your past. This doesn't mean arrogance, it means wisdom. Even Jesus surrounded himself with people who could handle his assignment. He didn't reveal everything to the crowd. He shared destiny conversations with his inner circle. Your mindset must be guarded by relationships that nurture it. If the voices around you are constantly negative, critical, or faithless, your mind will absorb it. But if your environment is filled with people who believe, your thoughts will rise to the level of your promise. Your promise requires the right community. Without it, your mindset will struggle under the weight of negativity. With it, your mindset will thrive and carry you forward into destiny. Vision is the ability to see past what is in front of you into what God has prepared for you. It is not denial of reality. It is recognition of a greater reality. A promise mindset requires vision, because the promise is always bigger than your current situation. If you only see what's in front of you, you'll never step into what's ahead of you. Vision trains the mind to look beyond limitations. It allows you to believe in tomorrow when today looks bleak. Without vision, your mindset will shrink to match your circumstances instead of your destiny. Vision is what kept Joseph alive in the pit and in the prison. He saw himself in the palace long before he got there. That picture in his mind sustained him through betrayal, hardship, and false accusations. Vision gave him a promise mindset when everything around him screamed otherwise. The danger of losing vision is that your mindset collapses into despair. You begin to think your current state is your permanent state. But vision lifts your eyes to see that your today is temporary and your tomorrow is already written. A promise mindset doesn't just think about where you are. It imagines where God is taking you. It refuses to be confined by present circumstances. It keeps hope alive in seasons where others give up. Vision isn't just about dreaming. It's about training your mind to align with destiny. A vision-filled mindset will fuel your actions, guide your decisions, and anchor your faith. Without it, your thoughts drift aimlessly. If you want to inherit your promise, you must protect your vision. Because when your vision dies, your mindset dies with it. Faith and vision are powerful, but without discipline, they will crumble under pressure. Discipline is what keeps your mindset aligned when distractions, temptations, and challenges come. It is the guardrail that prevents your thoughts from veering off course. A promise is not just about believing, it's about managing, and management requires discipline. You cannot walk into a land flowing with milk and honey if your mindset has no restraint. Abundance without discipline leads to destruction. Discipline trains your mind to stay focused, It reminds you that temporary feelings cannot dictate permanent decisions. When your emotions scream, quit, discipline whispers, stay. When laziness says, later, discipline says, now. Many lose their promise not because they lack faith, but because they lack consistency. They have the right vision, but the wrong habits. Their minds are stirred in moments of inspiration, but collapse in seasons of testing. Discipline is what bridges the gap between inspiration and manifestation. A disciplined mind knows how to say no to distractions. It knows how to prioritize what matters most. It refuses to waste mental energy on things that don't align with the promise. Discipline becomes the structure that holds faith in place. Even Jesus modeled discipline. He often withdrew to pray, he fasted, and he guarded his mission against unnecessary detours. If discipline was necessary for him, it is necessary for us. Your mindset cannot be fully renewed without discipline, because without it, every new thought will be temporary. But with it, your promise mindset becomes unshakable regardless of what life throws at you. Sometimes the delay you experience is not in God's timing, but in your mindset. The promise is ready, but your thoughts are not. God will never release something into your life that your mind is not prepared to handle. You may be praying for abundance, but if your mindset is still bound by lack, you will mismanage it. You may be praying for love, but if your mindset is still shaped by rejection, you will sabotage it. The shift in thinking is the bridge between prayer and manifestation. The children of Israel stood at the edge of Canaan, but their mindset kept them out. The land was ready, but their thoughts were not. They saw themselves as grasshoppers. And that mindset became their reality. Their delay wasn't in God's power, it was in their perception. This is why shifting your mindset is so critical. God is not waiting for circumstances to change. He is waiting for your thoughts to align with His Word. The moment your mind embraces the promise, your life begins to move toward it. Your mindset is either a gate or a barrier. It either opens the way for the promise or blocks it from entering. That's why breakthrough often happens the moment your thoughts shift, even before your situation changes. When your mind begins to think like a victor instead of a victim, doors start opening. When your thoughts align with destiny instead of defeat, opportunities appear that were always there but hidden from your old mindset. The promise is not far. It's waiting on your thoughts to catch up with God's truth. Worship is more than a song. It is a shift in focus. When you worship, you take your mind off the size of your problem and fix it on the greatness of your God. That realignment transforms your thoughts and restores your perspective. Worship elevates your mindset. It pulls you out of despair and anchors you in hope. It reminds your thoughts that God is still in control, no matter what life looks like. A worship-filled mind cannot stay defeated. When Paul and Silas were in prison, they didn't complain. They worshiped. And their worship shifted their perspective, which in turn shifted their atmosphere. Chains broke, doors opened, and freedom came, not because of their situation, but because of their mindset in worship. Worship reminds your mind of God's resume. It brings to memory every miracle, every healing, every breakthrough He has already done. That memory builds faith and silences doubt. Your mindset becomes anchored in the unchanging nature of God. The enemy hates worship because it takes your thoughts off the problem and places them on the solution. He wants you focused on fear, but worship fills your mind with faith. He wants you overwhelmed by lack, but worship fills your mind with abundance. Worship is warfare for your mindset. It dismantles lies, breaks chains of negativity, and fills your thoughts with truth. A mind soaked in worship is a mind prepared to receive promise. If you want to shift your mindset quickly, open your mouth in worship. Because the moment you magnify God, your problems lose their power in your thoughts. A promise mindset refuses to dwell on what can't be done and instead asks, what can God do? It refuses to be trapped by human limits because it is anchored in divine possibilities. The natural mind always calculates what is reasonable, but the renewed mind believes in what is supernatural. A promise is never logical. It always exceeds what your own hands could accomplish. That's why you must train your thoughts to think in possibilities. When the angel told Mary she would conceive, logic said it was impossible. But faith said, with God, nothing shall be impossible. That mindset shift positioned her to receive what had never been done before. Limitation. Thinking closes doors before you even knock. It convinces you that success is for others, but not for you. But possibility thinking opens your mind to opportunities you never considered. It says, why not me? Why not now? A promise mindset doesn't deny difficulty. It just refuses to let difficulty define destiny. It acknowledges the mountain, but believes it can be moved. It sees the Red Sea, but believes it can be parted. When your thoughts are anchored in possibility, you begin to expect miracles instead of merely hoping for them. You position your mind to see doors where others see walls. Your promise requires a mind that thinks beyond limits. Because God is not limited by your resources, your history, or your abilities. He is only limited by your mindset. Every change in life begins with a change in thought. If your mind remains the same, your life will remain the same. Transformation begins in the hidden place of your thinking long before it shows in your circumstances. When your thoughts shift, your choices shift. When your choices shift, your habits shift. And when your habits shift, your entire life begins to align with the promise of God. The real battlefield is not in your hands, but in your head. A transformed mind no longer reacts the same way to challenges. It sees problems as opportunities, delays as preparation, and setbacks as setups. That shift changes how you live, how you speak, and how you expect. God is not only after your actions, He is after your mindset. Because if your thoughts don't change, any external change will be temporary. But when your mind is transformed, your life follows permanently. Transformation doesn't happen overnight, but it begins the moment you start thinking differently. The moment you choose faith over fear, gratitude over complaint, vision over despair, you are being transformed. The beauty of a renewed mind is that it attracts what it believes. When your thoughts shift to align with God's promise, your life starts drawing in the very things you once thought impossible. Your destiny depends on your willingness to let God transform your mind, because when the mind is renewed, the promise becomes inevitable.